What if the most mysterious figures in history were among us, and we still don't know who they really are? Their faces have been erased by time, their deeds shrouded in mystery, and their names are nothing but guesses. These aren't just unknown heroes, they're true ghosts of history. Before we dive into this world of secrets and unanswered questions, subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Ahead lies something truly mysterious. France, 17th century. It's the twilight of the era of Louis XIV, the Sun King. At his court, luxury and intrigue are woven together like golden fabric. But in the shadows of Versailles, there is something far more unsettling, a man whose face no one has ever seen. He is imprisoned. His identity is hidden even from the guards, and his face is forever concealed beneath an IR, an iron mask. Many have heard of him, but few know the details. A single man, transferred from prison to prison. The guards swear loyalty to the king. Do not ask, do not look, do not speak. His cell was the Bastille, his world, chains and silence. Who was this man? The brother of Louis XIV, a disgraced politician, or perhaps the king's double, too dangerous to be allowed to live in freedom? The accounts from those years are contradictory, but documents, letters, and even memoirs of those who were once close to him have survived. One jailer wrote, "I did not know his name, but I knew this man was not ordinary. He carried himself with dignity. He spoke little, but his gaze was like a king's." Historians still argue about it to this day. Some claim that he was Louis's older brother, illegitimate and therefore dangerous. Others speak of a conspiracy in which the name of this prisoner is the key to the downfall of an entire dynasty. But if that's the case, why did he remain silent? Why didn't he try to escape or reveal his identity? Maybe his silence wasn't by choice, but a sentence. Picture this, a dark stone cell. Dampness, silence. Only the sound of the guard's footsteps and the occasional grinding of locks. In this cell, a man whose face is hidden by a metal mask. The mask fits tightly around his head, preventing anyone from seeing his expression or hearing his voice. Who is he? Why was he so thoroughly isolated from the world? And most importantly, why do we still not know who he was? The story of the man in the iron mask is one of the creepiest and most inexplicable mysteries in French history. His existence is confirmed by historical documents, letters, and reports. This is not a fabrication, but his name remains unknown to this day. He spent years, maybe even decades, in captivity, moving from prison to prison, under heavy guard, forbidden from any communication. The only thing we know for sure is that he was considered dangerous not because of his strength or any crimes, but because of what he knew, or because of who he was. Rumors about the mysterious prisoner began to spread in 1669, during the reign of Louis XIV. He was transferred from one fortress to another, first to Pignerol, then to Exils, later to Sainte Marguerite, and finally to the Bastille. All of these prisons were intended for especially important prisoners. They were guarded by loyal and trusted people, such as Benign d'Auvergne, the jailer who accompanied the prisoner throughout his life. Benign was the only one allowed to enter the prisoner's cell. He received strict orders. It was forbidden to say the prisoner's name, forbidden to remove the mask, and forbidden to allow any contact with anyone. Breaking these rules meant the death penalty. It is interesting that Dober left behind letters and reports that mention the prisoner. He noted that the man in the mask behaved calmly. He didn't try to escape, didn't argue, and never said anything unnecessary. He could read, conducted himself with dignity, and had a certain inner nobility. According to him, this was a man, someone who was used to comfort and respect. But who could he have been? There are countless theories. One of the most popular versions is that he was the brother of Louis XIV, a secret one, possibly illegitimate. If that were the case, he could have claimed the throne. In times when politics were woven with intrigue, even a single rumor was enough to shake the foundations of power. And if such a brother really did exist, it would have been easier for Louis to hide his existence than to explain why he wasn't the heir. And to hide him meant to remove him forever, without killing him. There's another theory as well. He was the king's double. It's known that Louis XIV feared assassination attempts and used doubles for some public appearances. Imagine if one of them found out too much or, on the contrary, decided to pass himself off as the real king. Eliminating him could have sparked rumors. Isolation, on the other hand, was a cleaner solution. Some historians believe that he was a high-ranking official or a diplomat who learned something he wasn't supposed to know. Perhaps he witnessed something so compromising that the only way out for those in power was to make him disappear. But not to die, just to disappear. Quietly, without a trace. Interestingly, the iron mask is a detail that appeared later. In reality, it was most likely made of velvet or leather, covering his face. But in the public consciousness, the image of the iron mask became a symbol of absolute imprisonment. No face, no person, only a mystery. Great writers also wrote about the prisoner. Voltaire mentioned him in his notes. He wrote that the prisoner ate the finest food, wore good clothes, but remained in complete isolation. Later, Alexandre Dumas turned this story into the legend of the Man in the Iron Mask. He became the hero of novels, the king's brother, a participant in conspiracies. But Dumas was not a historian. He romanticized the story, giving it drama and grandeur. However, as usual, the truth is darker. We know that the man died in 1703 in the Bastille. The name on the grave was Marcaille, but no one knew anyone by that name. His personal belongings were burned, the mask destroyed, and the body buried without a trace. All documents were classified, as if he had never existed. Only a few surviving letters and rumors kept his memory alive. Modern researchers, including forensic experts, archivists, and historians, are still trying to piece together the story. There have been DNA studies of the remains and analyses of documents. But every new fact only leads to more questions. Not a single name proposed as a theory matches all the available data. And just think, this person lived, breathed, thought, and hoped. He might have written poetry or kept a diary. He may have dreamed of freedom. But history took away even his face, and we will never know whether he was a hero, a victim, a traitor, or a savior. One thing is clear. If the authorities were willing to hide his existence so thoroughly and for so long, then the truth about him must have been truly dangerous. After the prisoner's death in 1703, by order of the king, all documents related to him were either destroyed or classified. His room was cleaned out down to the last straw, and anyone who had ever heard his voice had to sign an oath of silence. This was not just the death of a prisoner. It was an attempt to erase a person from history itself. But mysteries don't disappear just because they're swept under the rug. They only grow stronger. And over the following centuries, the name of the Man in the Iron Mask continued to captivate people's minds. Some believed he was the son of and of Austria from an extramarital affair, and therefore the king's brother. Others speculated that he was a minister or even a general who knew something that could destroy the crown's reputation. Archival records mention that the prisoner was referred to as an old servant, but the documents are deliberately written in a vague manner. For example, in a letter from Marshal Louis de Louvois to the king, it says, "I have made sure that the man in question is kept in complete isolation. His guard strictly follows instructions. His name is not mentioned anywhere. He cannot speak, write, or communicate." Such caution is not typical for criminals, but for those who possess dangerous information. This sets him apart from other prisoners of that time. Louis XIV kept a list of prisoners, many of whom he personally inspected. But when it came to the man in the mask, he remained secretive. Some historians even suggest that only 4 people knew of his existence: Louis himself, Minister Louvois, the jailer de Aubert, and the prisoner. Does this mean that the mask was hiding a threat to the entire monarchy? Interestingly, even centuries later, historians have not reached a consensus. One of the most plausible hypotheses is the version about Count Ercole Mathioli, an Italian diplomat who revealed the secret negotiations of the French and the purchase of the Casteller fortress. For this, Louis allegedly ordered him to be kidnapped and imprisoned. Mathioli had connections, a name, and influence. Doing this openly would have meant causing an international scandal. It was easier to make him disappear, without a name, without a face. But there's a catch. According to the records, Mathioli died in 1694, 9 years before the prisoner in the Bastille passed away. A forgery, a double? Or was Mathioli not the one hidden behind the mask at all? Later, more theories were proposed. Valois, a royal bastard, Etienne Doche, Cardinal Mazarin's secretary, and even the real Louis XIV. According to this strange theory, the king was once replaced, and the real Louis languished in prison while a double ruled the country. The theory sounds like a novel, and it probably is one. But what can be said for sure? The masked man was no ordinary prisoner. He was an important figure, possibly key to the entire history of France. Another curious fact, in the Bastille, the prisoner was kept in a solitary cell with double doors and double guards. No other inmate was given such measures. The door leading to his cell was built to muffle sounds. You couldn't even hear a cough from outside. Why go to so much trouble if he was just another criminal? Some letters found later indicate that the prisoner received books. Historians suggest these were philosophical works, possibly the Bible. He had a writing desk and ink, but all his papers were burned after being read. Not a single letter from him has survived to this day. All that's left is a shadow. That's exactly what makes him one of the most mysterious figures in history. He wasn't just a man without a name. He was a man whom the state denied the right to exist. He wasn't tortured, killed, or put on display. He was simply isolated, his face erased, and then there was silence. Maybe that's exactly why history clings to him, because he is a symbol of how those in power can turn a person into a ghost. He is a living illustration of how fear can make kings hide inconvenient truths. And if you think about it, the man in the iron mask could be anyone. He could have been a victim, a traitor, a hero, or just an unlucky person who ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. But that's exactly what's frightening, that a person can disappear from history, leaving behind only a mask. This is where the first story ends. But this is only the beginning. Ahead are even darker, even more inexplicable figures. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Up next is another mystery that will give you goosebumps. Chapter 2. Jack the Ripper, the killer who was never caught. London, 1888. Autumn, soaked with dampness and fear. In the narrow alleys of East End, among poverty, filth, and the darkness of night, a phantom is at work. He appears suddenly, kills quickly, and vanishes without a trace. No one sees him, but the whole city talks about him. He becomes a legend in his own lifetime. He receives a name that still frightens people to this day, Jack the Ripper. Before Jack appeared, London was full of crime, but not terror. Murders happened, of course, but no one was afraid to go out at night. Everything changed in August 1888, when the police found the body of a woman, Mary Ann Nichols. Her throat was cut, and her body was mutilated. A week later, another body. And again, the same signature. In just a few weeks, at least 5 women are killed. All of them are brothel workers. They were all murdered in the same way, but it's as if the killer is mocking them. He leaves no traces, no witnesses. The police are at a loss. In East End, where poverty reigns, thousands of people wear dirty coats and black hats, and anyone could be a suspect. Panic begins to spread. Newspapers publish horrifying details every day. Letters supposedly from the killer start to appear. One of them is signed, "Yours truly, Jack the Ripper." That's how he got his name. But who was he? Why did he kill? And why was he never caught? There are several details that make the Jack the Ripper case truly unique. First, the speed. The crimes were committed literally in a matter of minutes, right on the street near people's homes, in conditions where any sound could have given the killer away. Second, the brutality. The victims didn't just have their throats cut. Their bodies were cut open, their organs removed. Someone clearly knew anatomy. Does that sound like the work of an ordinary criminal? But perhaps most importantly, he stopped. After the 5th murder, there was silence. He disappeared just as suddenly as he had appeared. No traces, no arrests, no bodies. Only shadows in the alleys. The investigators of that time were convinced this was not just a maniac, but someone with training, someone who understood how the police worked, someone who could blend into the crowd, manipulate time and place. Maybe a doctor, maybe a butcher, maybe an aristocrat. One of the most sensational theories was that he was a physician to the royal household. The theory claims that Jack knew anatomy and was able to make precise incisions. His victims died almost silently, with quick and accurate movements. This means he possessed not only cruelty, but also skill. That rules out randomness and points to premeditation. There were suspects. One of them was Montague Druitt, a schoolteacher who committed suicide shortly after the last murder. Rumor has it that the police found strange notes in his possession. Another was Aaron Kosminski, a Polish Jew with mental health issues who lived near the crime scenes. His name resurfaced again in 2014 when a book was published claiming that DNA from the crime scene matched his genetics. However, experts immediately criticized the methodology, and the evidence was deemed shaky. There was even a theory about a female doctor obsessed with jealousy. But there are no documents to support this. The darkest theory, Jack was a police officer. He knew the patrol routes, could disappear unnoticed, and didn't arouse suspicion. He destroyed evidence and wasn't afraid of being caught. If that's true, he wasn't caught not because they couldn't, but because they didn't want to. Interestingly, Even after 130 years, the case remains unsolved. It is considered the most famous unsolved case in the history of criminology. Thousands of researchers, writers, and journalists have dedicated their lives to finding the answer. But the evidence either disappeared or never existed. Crime maps, timelines, anatomical diagrams, all of this has been studied for decades. But the killer remained a shadow. Why did he only kill women? Why did he choose only a specific area? Why did he stop? These are questions that have no answer. Maybe he died. Maybe he moved away. Or maybe he just realized the game was over and disappeared. Jack the Ripper became a symbol of fear, a figure who inspired hundreds of theories and dozens of movies. He became part of pop culture. But behind that name are real victims, women who had names: Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly. All of them lived in poverty. All of them died a terrible death. And no one was ever punished for it. And that, perhaps, is the main mystery. How could someone kill with impunity and then disappear forever in one of the most civilized cities in the world, during the era of newspapers, carriages, and police? When silence fell after the fifth murder, London held its breath. The police intensified their efforts, questioning hundreds of people. The newspapers were practically hysterical, fueling the residents' fears. And yet, there were no new bodies, no new leads. It seemed as if the city itself was afraid to admit it. Maybe he simply vanished. But vanished doesn't mean forgotten. Decades later, the Scotland Yard archives were studied over and over again. The evidence seemed elusive. A hat found next to the body. Letters supposedly written by the killer. One of the envelopes was said to contain part of a human kidney. His signature, "From Hell," became iconic, terrifying, and symbolic. But it's impossible to prove their authenticity. Some historians claim these letters were fabrications by journalists hungry for sensational stories. Others believe their author was the real killer. But even if that's true, the evidence has disappeared. Paper is not bone, not blood, not a knife. It's easily lost, especially back in 1888. What's most striking is the indifference toward the victims. The newspapers described them as women of easy virtue, without delving into the details of their lives. Meanwhile, each of them had a name, a past, and dreams. They lived in terrible conditions, in rooms without heating, making a living with their bodies. Their deaths were horrific, but society's reaction was even more horrifying. Many believed that Jack was cleaning up the streets, that his victims were the filth of society. These cruel words were heard in the press, in Parliament, even in the police. This made it easy to turn a blind eye to the investigation's ineffectiveness. Who would seek revenge for a murdered prostitute? No one. And that is a crime no less than murder itself. It was as if Jack sensed this. He chose the vulnerable, those whose families wouldn't look for them, those whose names were easy to forget. That made him truly dangerous. He wasn't just a killer, he was a mirror reflecting society's cynicism. In the years that followed, the number of suspects only grew. There were more than 100. And with each passing decade, new theories emerged, each more exotic than the last. Some believed that Jack was an immigrant, while others thought he was a psychiatric hospital patient who had been released by mistake. There was even a theory that he was an artist who turned murder into art, or a member of a secret society performing rituals. None of these hypotheses were ever proven. With the development of forensic science, attempts were made to analyze the preserved materials. In the early 2000s, researchers applied modern DNA analysis methods to the items that had been found. The results were controversial. The samples were too old and contaminated. Some claimed that traces of DNA from a person with the last name Kosminski were found on one of the victim's shawls. But scientists criticized the quality of the analysis, the methodology, and the assumptions. The evidence remained shaky. As for the motives, they still remain a mystery. Some are convinced that Jack killed out of hatred for women. Others believe he derived psychological satisfaction from control, power, and fear. Still others think it was revenge against society, possibly even religiously motivated. But none of these theories explain the main thing. Why did he stop? After all, killers, especially serial ones, rarely stop. They either die or get caught. But Jack seemed to just vanish. This suggests that he might have been someone with a specific goal. Maybe he wanted to scare society or provoke a political response. Or maybe he just got bored. If that's the case, he was a cold-blooded, rational person who decided for himself when to start and when to stop. That sets him apart from typical maniacs. It makes him smarter, more dangerous, frighteningly real. What's especially interesting is that the image of the Ripper started to become distorted. He was romanticized, portrayed in movies, books, and comics. His image became iconic: a top hat, a dark cloak, a gleaming knife. But behind that silhouette lies absolute horror, a real person who killed without mercy. A person who remained among us and was never caught. Many modern investigators call Jack's case hopeless. The evidence is lost, and there are no more witnesses. And yet, the interest doesn't fade, because deep down everyone fears that such people can exist, without motives, without mercy, without punishment. And maybe that's exactly what makes him one of the most mysterious figures in history. Chapter 3. Kaspar Hauser. The Boy Without a Past. May 26, 1828, the city of Nuremberg, Bavaria. A hot day. The streets are noisy, people are celebrating spring. And suddenly, a strange teenager appears, dressed in peasant clothes, walking unsteadily with an unusually straight posture. He is holding an envelope. He doesn't know where he is. He hardly speaks at all. The only phrases he repeats, like a memorized poem, are, "I want to be a cavalryman, like my father," and "horse, horse." This is how the story of Kaspar Hauser begins, the boy with no past. At first, the police think he's just a runaway orphan, but they quickly realize it's much more complicated. Kaspar can hardly do anything. He doesn't know how to use a spoon, doesn't recognize everyday objects, and is afraid of candles and mirrors. But at the same time, his handwriting is beautiful, as if he had practiced for years. How is that possible? He is taken to the police station and then to an orphanage. There, he tells the first thing he remembers. He spent his entire childhood in a cell. A small, dark room with no windows, no sun, no people. His food was bread and water. The only things he had were a wooden toy and a straw mat. No one ever spoke to him. Only once a day, someone would come in, leave food, and leave. Sometimes, Kaspar says, they would slip him some paper and make him write letters. But he doesn't know why. And one day, this person came, taught him a few phrases, told him to repeat them, and let him go into the city. That's it. The story sounds like nonsense, but the boy is real. Doctors examine him. Some consider him mentally retarded, others think he's gifted. He quickly learns to read, write, and draw. He develops at an incredible pace. But his childlike naivety and fear don't go away. The city is shocked. Newspapers are full of headlines. The mysterious boy, the wild child of Europe. Speculation begins. Where is he from? Who are his parents? And most importantly, why was he kept in captivity? The first sensational theory emerges. Kaspar is the heir to the throne. He is linked to the Baden ducal house. Supposedly, to clear the way to the throne, the real heir was replaced, and the baby was hidden away. The story is almost like a fairy tale, but the motives are quite real. Politics in the 19th century was a ruthless business. Supporters of this theory claim that his handwriting and manners are consistent with aristocratic upbringing. But opponents argue that he could have acquired all of that in Nuremberg. After all, he was immediately surrounded by teachers, doctors, and researchers. Kaspar is taken around to salons. He is shown off as a curiosity. He becomes a celebrity. People watch him, study him, and write about him. His life turns into a public spectacle. But behind the facade of interest lies fear. Who is he really? Soon, strange events begin to happen. Kaspar is attacked in his own room. Someone hit him on the head with a heavy object. He survives, but the blow leaves a mark. Someone doesn't want him to speak or even to live. This isn't the only attempt. 6 months later, there's another attack. An unknown assailant wounds him in the chest. There are no traces, no witnesses. The police are at a loss. Kaspar himself claims, "It was the one who kept me in the basement." But he can't describe him. People start to have doubts. Maybe he made it all up or wounded himself. So an alternative theory emerges. Kaspar isn't a prisoner, but a faker, a brilliant liar who decided to become famous. Supposedly, he memorized some phrases, invented a persona, and went out into the street. But then why did someone try to kill him? Why was he afraid of confined spaces and loud noises for the rest of his life? Why, even after learning to read and write, couldn't he properly describe his childhood? He really did try to adapt. He studied painting and got into philosophy. But society wouldn't let him go. Every step he took was discussed, he was analyzed, examined, they even measured his skull. And then the final thing happened. On December 17th, 1833, Kaspar comes home with a wound in his chest. He is found bleeding out in the park. He claims, "A man called me over. He wanted to show me where I come from." A note is found at the scene. It contains a strange text with spelling mistakes and an odd signature. The note hints that the killer knows who Kaspar is, but doesn't mention a name. 3 days later, he dies. He is 21 years old. His death causes an uproar. Some are convinced he was eliminated so he wouldn't talk. Some believe it was an attempt to attract attention that ended in tragedy. To this day, it's unclear whether he really was the victim of a political conspiracy or just a confused young man whose identity was blown up into legend. But one thing is certain, no one ever found out who Kaspar Hauser really was. His origins remain a mystery. No archive, no testimony has confirmed any of the theories. His grave in Ansbach reads, "Here lies Kaspar Hauser, a mystery of his time." And that's the best way to put it. He truly became a symbol of mystery, a man impossible to fully understand. He appeared out of nowhere and left, leaving only questions behind. After Kaspar Hauser's death, the debates didn't die down, they only grew stronger. And if during his life he was an object of interest, after his death he became an object of obsession. Everyone tried to prove He was either a great fraud or the most tragic victim of his time. Let's start with the main question. Where did he come from? The letter he arrived with in Nuremberg was supposedly written on behalf of a certain peasant. It said that the boy had been kept in isolation since childhood, that he knew nothing about the world, and that he wanted to join the army like his father. The letter was accompanied by another one, supposedly written by his mother, which stated that Kaspar was born on April 30th, 1812. But doubts quickly arose. All the letters were written in the same handwriting. Later, handwriting analysis showed that most likely, Kaspar wrote them himself. This undermined trust in his version of events. However, his supporters argued, of course, he could have been taught to write, especially if his caretaker. Fork is like mine. Midnight. You wanted to teach him certain phrases, but if he set everything up himself, then why? He didn't ask for money, he wasn't seeking fame. He didn't try to get involved in politics. On the contrary, being in the public, I scared him. Every day under the watchful eyes of doctors, teachers, officials. A life under the microscope. The theories about his noble origins never died. He was linked to the Baden ducal family, with claims that he was a switched prince. Supporting this theory were his appearance, his manners, and even the specific knowledge he displayed. One of the doctors wrote, "He wasn't just learning, he was remembering." But critics presented strong arguments. First of all, DNA research. In the early 2000s, scientists tried to extract genetic material from his hair and blood stains to compare it with the descendants of the Baden line. The results turned out to be inconclusive. There was only a partial match, not enough to confirm a familial relationship. Secondly, psychological research. Many specialists concluded that Kaspar suffered from hysterical psychopathy. He could believe in his own fantasies without realizing they were false. This doesn't make him a liar in the classic sense, but it does cast doubt on the reliability of his memories. But perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Maybe he really was a prisoner, but not a prince. Maybe his isolation wasn't a conspiracy, but the result of criminal negligence. Could he have been the illegitimate son of someone influential, or just a child hidden away to avoid shame? His numerous attacks also raised suspicions. The first blow was to the head, the second, to the chest. The third was a fatal wound, but every time there were no witnesses, almost always silent, leaving no traces. There was no certainty whether he was really attacked by others or if he wounded himself. Was it intentional or unconscious? Skeptics claimed that Kaspar sensed he was losing the public's interest. People were starting to see him as just an ordinary young man, not the mystery of Europe. Maybe he wanted to keep the attention on himself. Maybe he suffered from mental disorders that drove him to self-harm. Supporters, on the other hand, said he really was being hunted. Otherwise, how do you explain his fear, paranoia, and the state of panic that never left him until his death? The most horrifying was his final injury. He came back with a stab wound to his chest and a mysterious note. It was handwritten with mistakes, in a strange style. The handwriting didn't match his own. The note said that Hauser himself knows who I am and where I came from. The signature was unclear. Maybe it was a symbol. Maybe it was mockery. That note was like the final touch in the story. It was either a fake or a genuine message from someone who knew the truth. But even if that's the case, the truth died with Kaspar. The story of his life inspired artists, writers, and philosophers. He became a symbol of loneliness, alienation, and mystery. He was called the Child of Europe, the imprisoned prince, an innocent victim. But who he really was remains unknown. Today, his grave in Ansbach looks modest. The inscription on the tombstone is striking. The mystery of his time, nameless in life, killed in a mysterious way. Thousands of tourists come every year to see this place, not because Kaspar was a great ruler or a scholar, but because he reflects our own fears. The fear of being forgotten, of being nobody, of being destroyed, and never getting an answer as to why. Kaspar Hauser is not just a name, he is a symbol. A man who appeared out of nowhere, lived a short and strange life, and disappeared, leaving behind only silence. Chapter 4. Count Saint-Germain, the man who never died. Paris, mid-18th century. In the most sophisticated salons of Europe, a man appears whom no one knows anything about, but everyone talks about. His name is Count Saint-Germain. He plays the violin, speaks 6 languages, quotes ancient texts, knows physics, medicine, alchemy, and talks about events from 100 years ago as if he witnessed them himself. But most importantly, he does not age. From the very first time he appeared, the Count amazed his companions with his appearance. He was described as a man of about 40, tall, well-groomed, with lively eyes and a confident manner of speaking. But the years went by, decades passed, and he never changed. He was seen in 1740, 1750, 1760, and he always looked exactly the same. There were legends about him. Supposedly, he was at the court of Louis XIV. He argued with Newton, spoke with Columbus. Of course, all of this sounded unbelievable, but people who saw him began to question the boundaries of reality. Who was he really? The Count himself avoided direct answers. He rarely appeared in society, but when he spoke, he drew everyone's attention. He was called a man without a past and the greatest manipulator of his era. He introduced himself simply as the Count of Saint-Germain. No date of birth, no country of origin. Some claimed he was born in Transylvania. Others said he was the son of the Portuguese king. There were even theories that he was Jewish, Indian, or Russian. But no one could prove it, and he himself was in no hurry to dispel the myths. The writer Madame de Ade described meeting him in the 17th to 60s. He spoke of Henry III as if he were an old friend. And when I remarked in surprise that this was impossible, he just smiled. His calmness was unsettling, as if he knew more than he should. Saint-Germain played the piano and violin like a virtuoso. He knew both ancient and modern languages. He performed chemistry experiments that seemed like magic. He claimed he could turn metal into gold. In his laboratory, he created paints that wouldn't fade for centuries. One day, he showed a painting that, according to him, was painted 300 years ago. And the colors really were bright and fresh, as if painted yesterday. The French king, Louis XV, was so captivated that he offered the Count a place at court. But Saint-Germain refused rewards, titles, and wealth. He never accepted gifts, had no servants, but was always impeccably dressed. His home was modest but clean, filled with books, instruments, and alchemical flasks. He ate little, almost always just oatmeal. He didn't drink wine. and he seemed completely self-sufficient. One of his main traits was his air of mystery. He could disappear for years, then reappear in another city, another country, looking exactly the same age. He was seen in Vienna, London, St. Petersburg, The Hague, and Berlin. He interacted with scientists, composers, and philosophers. He was known by Voltaire, Rousseau, and Casanova. The latter, by the way, spoke of him with skepticism. He speaks brilliantly, but no one knows where he's from. His knowledge is inexplicable, but he never tells the truth. And yet, no one could ever catch him in a lie. He never got confused about dates. He spoke about historical events with such precision that historians would catch themselves thinking, what if he really was there? In 1784, news arrived. Count Saint Germain had died in the German town of Eckernford. A death certificate was drawn up, signed by a doctor. He was buried, but a few years later he was seen again, first in Vienna, then in Milan, then in Paris. Same manners, same voice, same posture. Even his appearance hadn't changed. And later, in the 1820s, a German philosopher claimed that he had met him in person. In the 1890s, he was allegedly spotted in Tibet, and in the 1970s in Las Vegas. All these messages seem ridiculous, but they all have the same description. Saint Germain became a symbol of eternal life, an urban legend. His image was used by Freemasons, Theosophists, and alchemists. Some considered him a true master of wisdom, while others saw him as a clever charlatan. But regardless, the facts have a solid core. He did exist. He was documented in records, letters, and memoirs. He really did walk the halls of European palaces, spoke with kings and queens, and demonstrated his knowledge and abilities. This is not a fabrication. There's only one question. Who was he? A brilliant imposter, an agent, a spy who needed to blur his own identity, or someone greater? The story of Count Saint Germain is not about mysticism. It's the story of a man whose biography was carefully and deliberately erased. Who did this? Was it him or someone else? And why? After the supposed death of Count Saint Germain in 1784, it was only a few years before reports started coming in. He's alive. He was seen in Vienna, then in Italy. Again and again, the same person with the same appearance and impeccable manners. People who had met him decades earlier claimed he hadn't aged a single day. This fueled the main legend that still surrounds his name to this day. Saint Germain was immortal, and as time went on, more and more evidence seemed to support this theory. But let's break everything down. Let's start with what is actually known. There's one version, a secret agent. The most rational theory is that the Count was a spy. His education, knowledge of languages, ability to blend in, lack of a permanent residence, and habit of living alone. All are traits of an 18th century professional spy. He could have been an agent for France, Prussia, Austria, or maybe even several powers at once. A fake identity, a carefully controlled image, and a minimal number of records about his past. That's how spies of that era operated. He might have deliberately created an aura of mystery to confuse anyone trying to keep tabs on him. But even in that case, there's still the question, how did he manage to keep the same appearance for so long? People change even at 35. After 20 years, you just don't look exactly the same. But not Saint Germain. He was described the same way for 40 years or more. Version 2. A trickster and a genius. Some believe the Count was a master manipulator, a man with an incredible intellect and a phenomenal memory. He could remember details, mimic accents, and anticipate reactions. His knowledge of history was probably the result of a good education and meticulous study of archives. And his expertise in chemistry and the arts came from decades of self-education. He never spoke directly, always using hints and insinuations. He never denied the rumors, but he never confirmed them either. This allowed everyone to see in him what they wanted. Some saw a prophet, others an adventurer, and still others an immortal. Such an approach is a powerful weapon in a world where reputation matters more than origin. His mystery became his brand, and the brand became his protection. Version 3. As a member of a secret order, Saint Germain is often associated with the Freemasons, Rosicrucians, and Theosophists. In the 20th century, the Theosophical Society declared him the Lord of Shambhala, an immortal guardian of humanity's knowledge. In their view, he was not a human being, but the embodiment of a higher teacher, a spirit guiding the development of civilization. Of course, there is no evidence to support these theories. They are based more on faith than on facts. But they do explain why people began to talk about him not as a person, but as a symbol. Esotericists claimed that Saint Germain possessed the secrets of prolonging life, transmuting substances, could move through space, and even go beyond the boundaries of time. All of this sounds like science fiction, but in the 19th century, such ideas were taken seriously, especially against the backdrop of real chemical and physical discoveries. Version 4. Several people under one name, there is also a pragmatic theory. Different people hid behind the name of Count Saint Germain. The image, mannerisms, and stories, all of this could have been passed on like a roll. One in Paris, another in Vienna, a third in London. This hypothesis is supported by overlapping timelines. He was seen in two countries almost at the same time. But critics point out, all the descriptions match too precisely. Voice, manner of speaking, style of dress. It's impossible to reproduce a personality in such detail as to fool even close acquaintances. The mystery of his death. The Count's death is a story of its own. The doctor who supposedly certified it later disappeared. The grave where he was buried contains no remains. There are documents about his death, but they are written in handwriting that does not match Saint Germain's own. And most importantly, no one saw the body. This gave rise to the belief that his death was staged. Why? To disappear, to start a new life, or to finish his previous role. Or maybe he was just tired. Saint Germain left no descendants. He kept no diaries, wrote no memoirs. Everything known about him comes from other people's letters. Casanova, Madame de, the French ambassador in The Hague, members of Louis XV's court. They all left notes, and all of them speak of a man unlike any other. Some modern writers believe that the Count deliberately erased his tracks, that he lived as an experiment, and that his goal was to show. If a person has no past, but possesses knowledge, charm, and the ability to keep a distance, he can be anyone he wants. Today, his name is used for elite perfumes, secret societies, and even esoteric schools. He became part of the cultural code, but we never learned the real name of Count Saint Germain. We don't know where he was born, when, where he came from, or even if he ever died. He is a living enigma, a living myth that became reality. A man whom history could neither record nor forget. Chapter 5. Zodiac, the killer who played games with the U.S. police. California, late 1960s. Is the era of love. Hippies, protests, freedom, rock and roll. Young people are living in the rhythm of change. But behind all this brightness, fear is hiding. Somewhere on quiet highways and lovers' parking lots, a man appears who turns murder into a game with fonts, ciphers, and newspaper puzzles. He calls himself the Zodiac, and to this day, no one knows who he is. The first attack takes place on December 20th, 1968, in the vicinity of Vallejo. Two teenagers, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, are sitting in a car. Someone approaches and, without a word, opens fire. The girl dies on the spot. The boy is fatally wounded. The perpetrator disappears into the darkness. 6 months later, there is another attack. Michael Mageau and Darlene Farron, the same area, the same situation, couple in a car. This time, the boy survives. He manages to describe the attacker. A white man of average age without a mask. He fired, then came back and finished the job. But the most terrifying thing happens afterward. A few days later, a letter arrives at the local newspaper. In it, there is a confession. The author describes the murder, provides details that only the police could have known, and demands the publication of a cryptogram, a coded message made up of 408 characters. Signed, a circle with a cross, the crosshair symbol. For the first time, the pseudonym Zodiac appears. He doesn't just kill. He declares himself the star of the show. He forces people to listen. He forces them to be afraid. The newspapers publish the cipher. The police are in a panic. People are trying to figure out what the code is, what it means. The answer comes a few days later. A couple from California, a schoolteacher and a housewife, decipher the message on their own. Inside is a deranged message. I like killing people because it's fun. It's even better than killing wild animals in. When Cheldal Lyle Brezikin. Lyle Craig, the most dangerous creature. When I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and everyone I have killed will become my slaves. No signatures, no names, just cold, calculated cruelty. And this is only the beginning. A month later, a new attack. The Zodiac kills Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard at Lake Berryessa. He comes out of the woods wearing a black mask with the same symbol, a cross inside a circle. There's a white symbol on the mask. He threatens them with a knife, ties them to a tree, then delivers multiple stabs. The girl dies, the guy survives, and describes the attacker's appearance. On the victim's car, the criminal leaves a message, the dates of the murders, and signs it Zodiac. Every time he's one step ahead. He doesn't have a specific pattern. He kills in different ways, with a gun, with a knife, during the day, at night, in the woods, in a parking lot. He doesn't have a clear profile. This makes the investigation almost impossible. The police work around the clock, but the Zodiac gets in touch again. He sends new letters, new ciphers. The game goes on. He writes to the newspapers, "If you don't publish my message on the front page, I'll attack a school bus. I'll shoot at the children until the tires burst." Panic sweeps through the county. Parents keep their children home from school, and the police escort the buses. But there is no attack. It's as if the Zodiac is playing with everyone's nerves. He knows that fear is his main weapon. Every one of his letters is a mix of narcissism, threats, and riddles. It's as if he enjoys the attention, mocks the police, and calls the detective stupid. He changes ciphers, alters his handwriting, and pretends to be different people. His goal is to confuse, and it works. Despite dozens of clues, descriptions, and forensic analyses, they can't catch him. Not a single theory adds up. There are dozens of suspects, but not one fits all the criteria. The key moment comes in October 1969. He kills taxi driver Paul Stein in downtown San Francisco. This time, it's not a couple on the outskirts, but an ordinary person in a crowded area. Children witness the murder from a window and give a description. The police even stop the suspect, but let him go because of a mistake in the description. Later, the Zodiac sends a piece of the victim's blood-stained shirt to the newspaper to prove it was him. It's humiliating. He's close. He's mocking us. After the murder of the taxi driver in San Francisco, the Zodiac case officially becomes the state's top priority investigation. Now he's not just hunting couples in remote places. He's killing in the city center. He's changing his style, and that's frightening. The next letters sent to newspaper offices are even more brazen. He mentions school buses again. He demands recognition. He wants fame. And once again, there are riddles. Another cipher, called the 340-character cipher, has remained unsolved for more than 50 years. Even experienced cryptographers can't crack this cipher. It was only in 2020, with the help of computer analysis, that a group of independent researchers from the US, Australia, and Belgium managed to crack it. Inside, there was no name, no threats, just a statement. I. Hope you're having fun trying to catch me. I'm not afraid of the gas chamber, because it will send me to paradise sooner. I now have plenty of slaves waiting for me. Him again. Again, no traces. Only a cold voice, mocking the attempts to solve the case. Suspects. Among the hundreds interviewed, there were a few people who left a mark on the case's history. The main one was Arthur Lee Allen. Allen was a teacher with suspicious behavior who lived not far from the crime scenes. He had run-ins with the law, a collection of weapons, and letters with mistakes similar to those in the Zodiac's letters. He wore a Zodiac brand watch. He had a secret stash. One of the witnesses identified him from a composite sketch, but none of this evidence provided direct proof. The handwriting didn't match. The DNA on the envelopes wasn't his. Allen died in 1992, never having been arrested. The second suspect is Rick Marshall, a former engineer who lived near the crime scenes and was obsessed with ciphers. But in his case, too, there was no convincing evidence. Other suspects included mentally unstable men, convicted criminals, and even former police officers. But there was always something missing: a DNA match, fingerprints, or a confession. The police contacted people several times who claimed they knew the killer, but they were either mentally ill or just seeking attention. There were also false confessions. One man, detained for a minor crime, claimed that he was the Zodiac. He knew some details, but later admitted he made it all up just to get free food and a place to sleep in jail. Unknown facts. The most disturbing thing is the number of crimes the Zodiac might have been responsible for. Officially, he is credited with 5 murders, but in his letters he says, "I killed 37. He gives dates and initials. The police tried to match this information with unsolved cases and did, in fact, find some matches. But it's impossible to prove. The Zodiac signature wasn't always present. The style wasn't always the same. It's possible that some of the crimes were committed by others. It's possible he took credit for murders he didn't commit. Or maybe his hunt was much bigger than we think. One of the most disturbing questions is, why did he stop? The last officially confirmed letter came in 1974. In it, he calls the movie The Exorcist the best satirical film of all time. Once again, it's signed with the Zodiac symbol, and again there are no clues, and then silence. He left, disappeared, stopped writing, vanished from the radar. There are several possibilities. He died, he moved and started under a different name, he was imprisoned for another crime, or he just got bored with it all. But in any case, he got away with it. He won his game. The legacy of the Zodiac case has spawned dozens of books, movies, and podcasts. His ciphers are studied at universities, his letters are analyzed by psychologists, and his image has become part of pop culture. But behind this legend, there is also reality. He wasn't a genius. He made mistakes. He wrote with grammatical errors, getting words mixed up. He was described as an ordinary, even unremarkable man of average height, wearing glasses and a jacket. He wasn't a monster, he was a human being. And that's the scariest part of all. He showed that to be remembered forever, you don't have to be a criminal genius. It's enough to be cold-blooded, persistent, and bold. Today, the case is officially open. Dozens of boxes of materials are stored in the San Francisco FBI archives. Every year, new theories emerge. But the main question remains. Who was the Zodiac? We don't know. Maybe he sat next to you on the bus. Maybe he worked at the library or taught at a school. He could have been anyone, and he is still anonymous. Chapter 6. Mana Chertomskaya, a woman who appeared out of nowhere. France, the small town of Chartres. The beginning of the 20th century. On the steps of the majestic Gothic cathedral, a woman appears, alone, gray-haired, but not old. Dressed modestly, almost poorly, but with a certain posture, as if she was used to holding her back straight. Her voice is rare. Her story is one of absence. No one knows her name. No one knows where she came from. She has no documents with her. No money either. But every day, at exactly the same hour, she sits on the steps of the cathedral, silent, simply watching. This is how one of the strangest human stories of 20th century Europe began. The locals called her Mana of Chartres, the woman from Chartres, because they knew nothing else about her. She didn't beg for alms. She didn't talk about God. She didn't preach or try to draw attention to herself, but she attracted it with her silence, her appearance, her presence. At first, passers-by thought she was just an ordinary vagrant. Maybe she escaped from a psychiatric hospital. Maybe she was a widow who had lost her mind. But with each passing day, it became clear that she wasn't like any of those people. Her behavior was orderly. She didn't mutter to herself, didn't curse, didn't gesture wildly. She simply observed. The townspeople began to treat her with respect. Some people brought her food, others brought books. She would take the bread and water, nodding silently. She never said, "Thank you." She never spoke at all. But the strangest things started happening later. Some people began to notice. The woman understood what was happening to them before they even opened their mouths. One old man claimed that he just sat next to her, and she touched his hand, and he felt relief. Another said that she looked at him and it was as if he suddenly knew what to do in a difficult situation. It seemed like coincidence, but more and more people kept coming back to those same steps. Not to the cathedral, but to her. They would talk and she would listen. Without words, without approval, but with a kind of unsettling depth. A journalist from Paris who had come to Chartres became interested in her. He started looking into her past, spoke with the police, with local monks, with the townspeople. There were no records, no missing person reports. Not a single monastery, psychiatric hospital, or charity organization knew anything about her. He tried to take her picture. She turned her back. He asked her a question. She didn't answer. When he left a note next to her asking her to tell her story, she burned it right in front of him. At that point, the journalist gave up. But in the article he wrote later, there was a phrase that became almost prophetic. Some people disappear so they can be searched for, but she appeared so that everything else would disappear. Years went by. The woman did not age unnoticed. Her face stayed the same. Her gray hair never changed. Her eyes, deep and black, seemed to know more than the whole town. People started calling her a saint, unofficially. Some believed she was mute. Others thought she had taken a vow of silence. Others believed she had once suffered a terrible tragedy. But she herself never said a single word. All the time she sat by the cathedral, no one ever heard a sound from her. One day, something strange happened. A little boy, the baker's son, got lost on the outskirts of town. His parents searched for him with the police for hours. In the evening, on the verge of despair, the mother approached the woman, simply stood in front of her, and began to cry. The woman stood up for the first time in a long while and walked. Without a word, she pointed toward the forest. That's where they found the boy, unharmed and sleeping. After that, people started coming to her even more often, but she never moved again. She would just watch, sometimes nod, but mostly she stayed silent. The authorities tried to move her to a shelter and once to a psychiatric facility, but each time she escaped, without aggression, without violence. She would simply leave and return to her spot. One winter, during an especially harsh frost, she wasn't there. The townspeople grew worried, but 2 days later, she reappeared, as if nothing had happened. No cough, no changes. Same clothes, same eyes. She became part of the city, like the street lamp in the square, like the cathedral. Some people walked by and didn't even notice her. Some would stop and couldn't walk away. I talked to her like a mirror, and she listened. More than 20 years passed. During that time, Manna Chertomskaya became an inseparable part of Chartres. She sat by the entrance to the cathedral in any weather, every day. She never asked for anything, never spoke. But everyone who approached felt that they weren't just a passerby, but a conversation partner. Even if you didn't say a word yourself. And then comes the spring of 1949. The weather is warm, the sun is shining bright. People go about their business as usual, but she's not there. At first, no one pays much attention to it. Sometimes she wouldn't show up. Rarely, but it happened. But day turns into night, and she still doesn't return. The second night passes. On the third day, panic starts to spread through the city, as if not just a person, but the very center of gravity had disappeared. The police search the surrounding areas, check hotels, hospitals, even shelters in neighboring communes. There's not a single trace. Not one person saw her leave. Not a single resident noticed her stepping outside her usual area. Only the bench remains at her usual spot. There's nothing on it, no note, no sign. Just one strange item, a dried sprig of lavender. Clean, not local. The authorities decide to investigate its possible origin. Once again, they send inquiries to national and religious institutions. No monastery, no hospital, no psychiatric clinic has reported anyone missing. Her fingerprints aren't in any database. Her name is still unknown. The city begins to build versions. Some say she died somewhere in the forest. Others are sure she simply disappeared, moved away, lost interest, or went to the sea. Others whisper that she was taken. By whom, it's unclear. But a month after her disappearance, something unexpected is found in the Chartres Cathedral archive, a secret room. While restoring an old part of the storage, the local archivist discovers a boarded-up room behind a wall. They open it. Inside, there's dust, old shelves, and papers from the 18th century. And among them, a strange folder with no inventory number or owner. Inside are dozens of sketches, faces, landscapes, silhouettes, and one of the faces is unmistakably Mana's. There's no signature, but it's recognizable down to the smallest detail. No one has any doubt the artist saw her. But on the back of one of the drawings, there's a date, 1778. They double-check the paper and it's old, authentic. The ink matches the era. A new theory emerges. She lived more than 150 years ago. But did she really live, or is it just someone who looks like her? But then why the copy? Why this particular face? Some townspeople believe she is a descendant of that woman. Some say rain-car reincarnation. Others are a phantom. Still others stay completely silent, afraid to say too much. There are only more and more questions. The last traces appear 2 years after her disappearance. In a distant monastery in Burgundy, a young novice finds an old book on a shelf. In the margins, there are handwritten notes, neat handwriting, almost calligraphic. Signed MS. The same initials that the locals gave to Mana Kordomskaya. The book contains spiritual reflections, but not quotes personal thoughts. And among them, one that would later be quoted in every newspaper. Sometimes, to hear yourself, you have to be silent for so long that the whole world starts speaking instead of you. That's all that remains. No body, no name, only emptiness and memory. What do we know for sure? In fact, almost nothing. She really did exist. Hundreds of people saw her, remembered her, respected her. Her silence became louder than any scream. She didn't ask, didn't demand, didn't seek attention, but she got it completely. Psychologists, sociologists, criminologists, theologians, dozens of specialists analyzed her behavior. Some said she suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, others that she had taken a vow of silence. Some even believed she was a committed pacifist who rejected words as a form of pressure. But the main thing is how she influenced people. Everyone who interacted with her spoke about an inner change. Some gave up bad habits, some made important decisions, and some simply felt a sense of peace. Mana Kordomskaya never wrote a book, never gave a single interview, never uttered a word, yet she left behind more than many who spoke loudly and often. You've listened all the way to the end. We have told you about 6 of the most mysterious individuals whose names remain a secret. If you found this interesting, please like, subscribe, and share this episode. And if you know any stories worthy of the next episode, let us know in the comments. Stories never end, they just hide in silence.